Sean Gaithright had no part in the shootings that took place here in Tampa. He was a barely 18-year-old young man who found himself caught up in a whirlwind here in Tampa. He found himself caught up in something that, as you've heard about for these last 5 weeks, he had no part in, ever. And as the evidence has shown you, and as I'm going to describe in further detail, he did nothing to knowingly assist anyone in carrying out these shootings that took place in Tampa. The state's case, like any criminal case really, can be looked at like a jigsaw puzzle. And law enforcement's job and the state attorney's job is to try to put the pieces together. Ultimately, it's your job to decide if they fit. And if you've done a jigsaw puzzle, and I'm sure all of us have at some point, you know there are times when you see a piece, looks like it should fit in this spot. Colors seem to be the same, the shape is similar, but then you try to jam it in there and it doesn't fit. And that's the nature of jigsaw puzzles. This is why they're fun. Sean Gaithright is one of those puzzle pieces. And that's the reason we have the system we have. That's why you all are here. Our system of justice is not perfect, but it's the best one the world has ever seen. And one of the reasons for that is we have protections to ensure people are not wrongfully convicted. One of those protections is to hold the state to the burden of proving to you beyond every reasonable doubt that a person is guilty. Now, it's convenient where Mr. Gonzalez left off talking about reasonable doubt. That's where I'm going to start. You'll hear many instructions on the law tomorrow, but one of them will be a definition of reasonable doubt. And our state, I would suggest, has a strange way of defining reasonable doubt, because it starts off first by defining what it's not before it defines what it is. And we may have discussed this instruction in jury selection weeks ago, but you'll hear tomorrow that reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such a doubt must not influence you to return a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of guilt. On the other hand, and this is when it begins defining reasonable doubt, if after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all the evidence, there's not an abiding conviction of guilt, or if you have a conviction and it is not one that is stable but which wavers and vacillates, then the charge has not been proven beyond every reason. The instruction, as Mr. Gonzalez told you, goes on to say a couple sentences later that reasonable doubt can arise from the evidence, lack of evidence, and conflicts in the evidence. I'm going to try to frame my argument on those three areas. I'm going to start by talking about the evidence and conflicts in the evidence, because they kind of go hand in hand in this case, I would suggest. And I want to start talking about the phone records, because you heard a lot about phone records. All kinds of phone records, frankly. One thing I want to remind you all is that Mr. Gaithright's phone is never actually collected in evidence. Law enforcement is relying on cell tower records and iCloud search warrant returns. But the one thing I want to talk about a little bit is the phone mapping, because you heard a lot about that from a couple of different witnesses. You first heard about it from Detective Klein, who he was tasked with going out and trying to corroborate where there were certain cell tower hits. And he himself told you that this is often a guessing game. It's an estimation based on records that the phone companies keep for their own purposes to try to maximize their coverage areas. One of the things you heard about was timing advance and call detail. And I'm showing you, by the way, this is a print screen from State's Exhibit 77. As you'll probably remember, I had difficulty playing it. We had to wait 5 minutes for it to catch up, so I'm not going to, it's already a long day, so I'm not going to go there. But you all will have that in the back with you when you're delivering. You can watch it. It's much easier to play on a computer than on these, on the system we have here. But this is a print screen that stops that at 4:45 a.m. And you'll see that it has timed hits, and this is Mr. Gaithright's phone number, hits that span about 4:34 to 4:45, so right in between when the shootings take place. You'll see that there are multiple hits in this area around the time of the shooting. But at the same time, at 4:39, the phone is hitting on the northern sector of this phone tower, which encompasses the Airbnb. It's also just south of Fletcher Avenue, far to the north of the shooting scene. If you recall when Detective Ramos described this area, and it's really everything involved in this case goes from just north of Fletcher, south to Bush, basically between Nebraska and just past McKinley. But right in between the Airbnb and the shooting is the entire USF campus. So as he described, to go between the two, you either have to go through USF or go around this way. So these hits, I believe, suggest to you, and I'll show you another one that is a print screen from 4:54, which is a little after the homicide. And here we have phones bouncing off towers over that entire area. I show you this to emphasize clearly these records are not reliable to pinpoint a location, because within this span, phone is hitting all over that entire area within just about a 10-minute span. But the one thing that you can be pretty certain of with these records, and Detective Ramos even described that, the towers have three sectors. And while it's an estimate to say where the phone may be within the range of the tower, the one thing that we can be pretty sure of is that it's within one of the three sectors of the tower. And if you look closely at these phone hits, they're basically almost all, if not all, on the northern sector of these towers. There's a couple on the eastern or western sides, which will cover some of the northern area, but almost all are on the northern sectors of the towers. And that's very important because of this tower right here. Because we know the tower is right here in this area on the USF campus, and really on the northern side of the USF campus. And the phone is hitting on the northern sector of it within seconds of when the shooting's taking place. Now you may be saying, well, how are these other hits taking place down here? Well, again, they're on the northern sides of the towers. So it's perfectly reasonable that the phone could be further away but connecting to the strongest signal, which could be one of these, but it cannot reasonably be south of this tower because it would not be hitting that sector of the tower. And that's the one thing we know. Again, you'll have this back there. You'll have the actual PowerPoint. Play it. Watch. Take a look closely at where these phones are hitting. It shows you not only how unreliable it is to suggest these tower records can give you specific locations, but pay attention to the sector that's being hit. Because there's no explanation, and you haven't heard an explanation for how we're on the northern side of that sector right when the shooting has just taken place. Now, a lot was also taken out of the phone, I guess you could say, but really from the iCloud search warrant. And the state has kind of picked certain pieces of evidence to highlight and suggest it's indicative of guilt. I'm asking you to look at the full picture, pay attention to the times, and pay close attention to really all the evidence surrounding these things that have been pulled out of the phone. You heard about, and frankly I'm not even sure why, but you heard about Mr. Gaithright's Instagram account, but Detective Ramos himself said there was really nothing of relevance from his Instagram account. There was from some others, but not from Mr. Gaithright's. Something else you'll see in looking at the phone records is there's very little communication between Mr. Gaithright and any of the co-defendants, with the exception of Mr. Chance, who is a friend, but again, almost no communication between him and any either of the Murphys or anyone else who's alleged to have been involved in this alleged conspiracy. One of the things, though, that you've heard about a lot is the one text message from Rashad Murphy to Mr. Gaithright. And again, this is another example. You look at that puzzle piece with a cursory glance, maybe it looks like it's going to fit. But here's what I want you to pay attention to about that, and this is why it doesn't fit. That text is allegedly sent to Mr. Gaithright in response to the conversation that Isaiah Chance is having with Charles Jones and some other people online. And what is said is, first, we got bigger S to tend to. And then Rashad Murphy is saying, they ain't worth our energy. This is in response to Chance talking to Charles Jones and his entourage. Rashad Murphy himself is saying, they ain't worth our energy. That is not suggesting it has anything to do with Charles Jones. That's suggesting it doesn't have anything to do with Charles Jones, because he's saying those people that Chance is talking to are not worth our energy. There's a suggestion that it's something saying that Sean Gaithright is part of some plot, but when you peel back the layers, it actually suggests the exact opposite. Now, what else do we know about that? That text is sent on June 8th.